Seattle is spending more than $90 million a year on trying to solve our growing homeless crisis. But the problem only seems to be getting worse. Is an expanded regional approach the answer?
They're treating us worse than they treat animals.
Homelessness could happen to anyone.
Leaders in Seattle and King County have spent decades trying to end the crisis, from overnight shelters to rapid rehousing to sweeps of unauthorized campsites, and are now even converting former jail space into homeless housing.
People can come in and use it if they want.
And the problem is not limited to just our backyard.
As people can't afford King County, they're coming down here to Pierce County.
How will a new regional approach to solving homelessness work? And who will pay for it?
We need millions more to be invested in housing, and we need it fast.
Our studio panel weighs in.
We need to very much work on prevention.
Here you go, man.
New hope for the homeless. Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. It's a losing battle in King County. About 20,000 people exited homelessness last year. But in that same time frame, 25,000 more people became homeless. Experts say our support systems are overwhelmed, but local leaders are calling for a new collaboration, a regional approach to deliver homeless services more efficiently. It sounds like a good idea, but it's still unclear how that collaboration will work or what new funding sources it might require. This week, we're talking with leaders at the city, county, and state levels to learn more about where our region is working together and falling short in helping the homeless. It's easy to see Seattle's homeless crisis as just another tent, another problem. But people like Lucy, who left an abusive partner, and John, who missed out on a job on a fishing boat, want you to see much more.
I try to understand that not everybody is out here because they want to be.
We're only human.
Do you guys have case manager anywhere or anything like that? Or
Chris Park is trying to help. He's an outreach program manager for the Metropolitan Improvement District in downtown Seattle.
and they were interested in emergency shelter.
The so-called MID team is one of many agencies on Seattle's streets in a crisis that's pulling this city and hundreds of others in our country apart.
Obviously, it's a polarizing conversation. Seattle is a very compassionate city, yet you also have individuals in the city who are very frustrated.
In part, that frustration stems from a troubling trend. Even as Seattle has nearly doubled its spending on homeless services in just the past 3 years, the number of people living without shelter in the city and King County has risen 40%.
Homelessness is a crisis across this region. The solutions, the action steps must come from all of us.
Seattle and King County signed an agreement back in May to better coordinate resources to tackle the homeless issue at a regional level, an effort Chris Park says can be successful with the proper amount of patience.
I think it's a good opportunity for it, and I think that we have to remember it's going to take time. You're talking about an issue that involves multiple systems, not just simply one.
Coordinating those multiple systems, from shelters to housing to mental health services and beyond, has been a rough road.
We need to be taxing these big businesses to provide.
Seattle's plan for an employee head tax to increase funding for homeless services was repealed this summer. King County's One Table collaboration with Seattle and other cities hasn't yet yielded any tangible progress. And yet,
We have had successes, and I think it's important to note those.
Mark Ellerbrook is King County's Regional Housing and Community Development Manager, now overseeing the remodel of an unused wing of the county jail as a low-barrier shelter for 100 people.
It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week shelter, so it's what we kind of call an enhanced shelters.
Studies show the city and county are getting more people into housing. But as rents in the area stay high, our homeless population, which includes the working poor, keeps increasing, making innovative ideas like the jail remodel all the more crucial.
This is really part of an effort of where can government step up with its own resources beyond financial resources. The thing that we need to do, and this really falls on multiple areas, is we really need to increase the amount of housing and affordable housing that are available.
Exactly, says State Senator Hans Zeiger.
At the end of the day, we've got to open up the market.
Zeiger, a Republican from the 25th District in Puyallup, is pushing for some new rules allowing for more tiny house developments across the state as a way to shift the homelessness discussion.
As we close that gap in terms of housing supply, I think we can begin to address some of the homelessness crisis.
He's also calling for improvements in mental health treatment, employment assistance, and other services too, as the state tries to collaborate with its partners to improve results.
I think we can do a better job of coordinating state services with the many nonprofits and local government agencies that are doing good work.
Ted Kelleher, Senior Managing Director of Housing Assistance for the State Department of Commerce, doesn't mince words on homelessness. Is the system we have in place right now working?
No.
He says there's a natural tension between cities on the front lines of homelessness and county and state agencies looking to coordinate.
That's a tough tension to manage.
But the Department of Commerce has been measuring homeless investments county by county for many years.
So we're really looking at things systemically.
That data has helped shape new guidance plans for local governments about the strategies that work best in a state trying to build a comprehensive homeless policy.
At the end of the day, it's a local decision, but we really push for a more regional approach because it's the only way it makes sense, and it's hard.
It is hard work to help the homeless.
We're trying to survive, until something comes up.
That work is worth it for people like Chris Park, unwilling to give up in the face of a growing crisis.
As frustrating as it is, remember that I don't believe people necessarily choose this, and that sometimes people need to borrow our hope in order to be able to move through in life.
And joining us to discuss this issue a bit further, we have with us Seattle City Council member Sally Bagshaw. Sally, good to have you as always.
Thank you.
We also have with us Marilyn Strickland. She is president and CEO of the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. Marilyn, good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
We also have with us Zylstra. She is interim director of All Home. Kira, good to have you too.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Gordon McHenry Jr. He is president of Solid Ground. Thank you all for being here. A big discussion ahead. I'm going to dive right into it with Sally if I could. Yeah. I want each of you actually to explain what your role is in dealing with our homeless crisis, and also if you could tell us what the general public should expect to see when it comes to this renewed regional approach in tackling homelessness. Sally.
Right. Well, I am chair of our finance committee for the Seattle City Council, and solving this problem is something I've been working on for decades, literally, both as a council member and before in my life as a prosecuting attorney. What we know is that this regional approach is what we have to dive into to see success. And as your introductory piece showed, people are frustrated. We're putting in $90 million from the city to help address some of these problems, but actually we know that citywide it's over $1 billion worth of investment. In order for us to really move forward, it's going to mean a regional approach with a lot more housing. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of units across a tri-county or four-county effort, and I know that's something that Marilyn's been working on.
Well, let's talk about Marilyn with this. Talk to Marilyn about this piece. Tell us how the Chamber and its members are connecting with this issue of homelessness, if you could, and also talk about your expectations regarding this regional effort going forward.
Absolutely. So, this issue is not a new one, as Sally pointed out. And, when you look at the work that the business community has been doing and is already doing, it's pretty profound. Starbucks, for example, is involved in No Child Sleeps Outside. We have, we talked about having this one table, but in reality, there are probably about a dozen tables doing different types of work. And I think that we should appreciate the fact that this is something that's important to the business community. As far as moving forward, though, with the regional role, I think that we need to look at, how can we plan where we need housing? Are there regulations and zoning laws that are keeping us from even building housing before we think about spending money? So really taking a look at the regulatory environment to see if there's anything that we can shake loose to allow the market to build more housing, understanding that we just need a lot more.
And we're going to dive into that issue in a bit. Thank you for bringing it up. Kira, I'll ask you about this. Talk to us a little bit about All Home, what role it's playing when it comes to homelessness locally, and what results we should expect from this work going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So All Home is part of King County and the Continuum of Care lead for Seattle-King County. So we can help guide the federal investments, but we also help to bring our community together in joining in conversation on solutions, and then bringing in best practices and data to help drive those solutions towards what works. As a community, in our efforts to align, we've actually seen tremendous progress. Last year, we housed twice as many households as we did just 4 years ago. So we're seeing progress, but still we make pretty isolated decisions at times that aren't joining together towards bigger progress. And so we know we can do better if we get to a more more regional approach.
Thank you for that. Gordon, I'll bring you in next. This is not the first time we've talked about regional solutions. In 2005, we had the 10-year committee to end homelessness, and here we are. So I want you to tell us about Solid Ground, what you do, and what you expect to see out of this latest effort.
Sure. Solid Ground is the anti-poverty community action agency. We're primarily based in King County, work in very close collaboration with a lot of other human service providers. So we see a lot of aspects of poverty, and clearly the one that's most prevalent is homelessness and housing instability, along with all the economic uncertainty that's associated with that. And it's in all parts of the county. So we're very excited that region is really focused on a regional solution to a regional problem. And I agree with Marilyn and Sally and Kira that it needs to be well established in King County, and it also needs to recognize that our populations move back and forth between Snohomish County, Kitsap County, Pierce County. So we're looking forward to some actual plans to move forward and begin to stem the pace of people slipping into homelessness.
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to move this conversation in a few different ways today. I want to talk about the dollars, and I want to talk about the regulatory pieces here too. Sally, starting with the dollars here. Seattle's spending more than $90 million a year on homelessness in the next budget, as you mentioned there. That's up from $39 million 5 years ago. But I wanted to look at some of the different data that's come out. The McKinsey report from earlier this year, it said our region is doing a better job at getting people into housing, as Kira mentioned there, but they also said we'd have to double our local investment to get everybody inside. I'm thinking about this. Is that the goal, to somehow double the investment? Does the city need to chip in more? Are you looking for more efficiencies?
Yes.
Help me out with this.
Well, you're right about the McKinsey report, and there was some pushback on that. So I've told my friends, let's stop fighting about the McKinsey report and cut it in half. Even if you cut it in half, they're saying we have to invest at least $200 million annually to help invest and get the housing numbers up across the counties.
Yeah.
But that is supported by the Eco Northwest study that was done. It's also supported by the work King County is doing and Claudia Balducci. We need millions more to be invested in housing, and we need it fast. And I talk about 2019 being the year of action. We have got to stop planning and start really building, and that may mean more resources. I do want to commend Starbucks. They have put a lot of money in. John Shetler with Amazon and Jeff Bezos put in, literally hundreds of millions of dollars. We've got to stop fighting between the sectors and say we're all in this together. We need the help of the nonprofits. We need the help of business. We need labor's help, and then to find parcels of property that we can build on. That said, keeping people in housing, what we make sure that we're working upstream in prevention. We really need more of that, and making sure that we divert people so they're not stuck in the system. I'm a huge fan of the landlord liaison program. And the more we can say, let's use the resources we have. Yes, we're going to need more dollars to make this happen. That's where we're going to have to move forward fast.
In talking about these dollars, Marilyn, this was definitely part of the employee head tax debate a few months ago. We're past that now and moving on to another piece of it. I'm trying to think about this. Where do you think our funding level should be with regard to the homeless? Should private businesses be a bigger part of that, or what do you think?
I think we need to take a step back, because one thing that we haven't done really well, in my opinion, is okay, what's the plan? How many do we think we need? At what income levels? And then think about where will we put the housing. And so, for example, we have a lot of publicly owned property. We're building a transit system, and we can put affordable housing near there. But I think one of the things I think is really important for the business community is, what's the plan? Where do we want to put it? What can the market handle on its own? And then what type of public support is needed? One thing that I have actually discussed is creating a regional housing authority that mirrors what we're doing with Sound Transit. Transportation has become a crisis here, and the voters have repeatedly said yes to investing in more mass transit. We should look at housing at all income levels as basic infrastructure. So think about how we can build workforce housing, mid-income housing, low-income housing, and maybe there's a mechanism similar to what we do with Sound Transit to try to inject a lot of capital into the market.
But where does that money come from? Is it from private business? Is it from a tax?
I mean, it would be from a variety of sources, but it's looking at, okay, what can the market build right now? Are there incentives that are needed to encourage more developers to want to build low-income housing? Because one reason it's not being built is that it's, it doesn't make money. And then when you look at what's needed on top of that, and then we think about going out to the public and saying, are you willing to pay for this?
Okay. Gordon, I'm going to head to you first and then to Kira on this question here. I want to talk about the inefficiencies, if they are there, in our homeless service system. I'm certainly hearing that they are. Where are you seeing those? Where do changes need to be made? And is more revenue needed to make some of these changes happen? Your take on this?
Certainly there's opportunities to have a more efficient and coordinated system to deal with homelessness and housing instability. We do see that. There are various pots of money, and so our case managers sometimes have money to provide a certain type of intervention, but not another one. The one I speak a lot about is putting more money into prevention. We have people who will tell us, I'm 30 days, I'm 10 days, I'm 3 days from being evicted, overdue rent, and there's some pots of money, many of them, which you cannot use until they're literally homeless. Yet we're sitting there knowing that they're going to be homeless in 3 or 4 days and have less of that money. So that's just one example. So I think there are some solutions, and I think we've been talking at these many tables about some of these very practical solutions that are oftentimes local and county-based. They're not always tied to the federal government.
I see. And I'm going to start shifting the conversation a little bit from the dollars to the efficiencies piece of this and the regulations. And Kira, let's talk about this. This agreement signed by the city and county back in May said that in December, this month, All Home would be restructured to give it more authority to oversee our local response to homelessness. Where are we in that process right now?
Well, we are very close. Really, in this month, we will be hearing from the executive and the mayor of the next steps of that work. And it's much further than how All Home will change. We're really looking at how our public investments are made in the community, and to the point of everyone here in this conversation, making sure that our investments are truly driven by the data, driven by the need, and aligned to make sure that each source of funding is being used for the right purpose. And exactly what Gordon's talking about. We need to ensure flexibility in how our investments are made in the community so that our providers aren't forced to make impossible decisions when they're delivering services.
What does that require? Governments to talk better to each other, and you're helping facilitate that?
Yeah, well, All Home has been in the position of trying to align conversations for a long time, and I would say everybody in our community is working hard to partner with one another, but it really goes beyond alignment and goes towards a true change in how we invest and a foundational change to our structure. So bringing together components of All Home, components of the city and the county that are really driving towards homelessness to make investments together, to ensure that we are working collectively. And that also goes beyond our public partners to our private partners, and everyone's investments really guiding towards one shared goal.
Well, here's a private partner right here.
Marilyn, what do you got? And I think that this is a really good segue, because one point that I want to make about my membership, which is very diverse, is people understand that we need to put more skin in the game. But the question really becomes about the system that exists now. How can we make it more efficient? How can we serve more people? And then when we've gone through that to make it as efficient as possible, looking at regulations and what we're doing with existing money, then let's develop a plan and say, okay, we need more resources, and here's how we get there.
So I think that Marilyn is right on that. And at the same time, these are words that I have been hearing literally decades, that we need to do more with less, that we need to have a better system. I think what we need to do is for the city and the county to come together and on some pilots to focus on what can we do in 2019 that can demonstrate to the world that we can make some moves, we can get some investments with the resources we have, and with the state's help. The Housing Trust Fund down there, they're talking about raising it up to $200 million, but that is a statewide investment. We could use $200 million in our county in 1 year. So I believe that, yes, we need to demonstrate that we are being as efficient as possible. Yes, I think Seattle and King County needs to come together in our Department of Human Services with their department that's similar, and with our public health, and use a public health model in investing and getting people off the streets.
Can I ask you another, just to twist this a little bit here when it comes to different regulations, as Marilyn was bringing up here, do we need to allow for more flexibility in our land laws? We heard from State Senator Zeiger in the setup piece, he has bipartisan support to push for more tiny house construction. Is giving cities more leeway on building regulations part of the answer here?
Yeah, sure it is. And with our detached accessory dwelling units, as an example, it's something that I've been pushing for the last decade. Let's make it simple. Let's have regulations cleared. Let's provide incentives to property owners. So we were out in front, and then we had a lawsuit. And then that lawsuit required an appeal. So we were 2 years behind right now of where we wanted to be a couple of years ago. I do believe that that's part of the answer. It's having DADUs, the detached accessory dwelling units, isn't solving the problem, but it's like what we've been saying, no silver bullet, but there is silver buckshot, and that's part of the buckshot, and we need to be looking at all these things.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Thank you.
That's one of your best.
And
Marilyn,
I think one
please.
thing I want to add too is, this is a growing metropolitan region, and this is truly an urban area right now. And even though we have rural and suburban communities around us, we have to really start to think seriously about what does it mean to be securely housed in the greater Seattle region today.
Does it mean a tiny house?
And before Or it would mean,
Yeah.
you get a 5,000 square foot lot, everyone's entitled to a single family home.
Right.
Cities don't operate that way anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what are the expectations in the 21st century with regard to car ownership,
Yeah.
mass transit, housing? And I think the one thing I want to raise is the ability for some of our big employers in Seattle to start to say, maybe I need to locate some of these large high-wage jobs outside of the city core.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about equity, but it's also geographic equity
Yeah.
as much as it's racial and inclusion.
I was going to ask where the market solution is here, because these businesses are going to want to get involved if there's a market solution of sorts here. Where do you think that is? Is it with less land regulation? Is it with some of these solutions you're talking about?
I would say that, where can you build housing right now? And let's
Yeah.
do Seattle as an example.
Sure.
There's an ongoing battle about HALA, the zoning situation about
Sure.
where we can build more multifamily housing and just add more stock.
Yeah.
And I think this battle's going to go on for a while, but we really have to look at, if we want to add more housing, we have to have different regulations.
Yeah.
I'd say another thing again that I raised earlier is that, some of the private developers are not going to build housing if they can't make some kind of a profit.
Sure.
And we can't demonize them for wanting to get some kind of return on their investment.
Of course.
We're not trying to ask government to do more with less.
Yeah.
We're just trying to ask government to show that we're maximizing the investment that's already being made today.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Please, yeah,
No, I just say
Gordon.
really
Yeah.
quick, I want to echo what Marilyn is saying in terms of where we are right now and where we need to be in 20, 25 years. So much of these problems are partly because of really strong growth, exacerbating societal challenges that have always been with us. But we have agencies, our partners, government partners, and even private ones who are doing all these forecasting. So we know where the current transportation hubs are that are based upon where people live. We can forecast where people are going to be living, and we can come up with a planned affordable housing in areas outside of Seattle and Bellevue that are throughout the county, so that it's much more achievable for people to live and work, and when needed, go in terms of transportation into these hubs. And we just need to buckle down and live into that and plan for that.
Sally, please.
So what I've talked with former Governor Gregoire within just the last couple of weeks about is thinking about three pathways. One is housing, one is business development, both small businesses here that are going to stay here and grow, but also inviting new businesses in, and they're focusing at what they call the middle income jobs. We need so much more. We've got a lot of high tech, high paying jobs. We've got the $15 an hour jobs, which aren't working in our city. You can't live here on $15 an hour.
Yeah.
And then the third is that transportation. So if we're thinking about three parallel paths,
Right.
but they're ultimately coming together, that's that regional solution
Yeah.
we're talking about. And every part of our county, and Snohomish, Pierce, and Kitsap, I believe, need to step up and help us take the share. But you've got to give them carrots. It can't just be sticks. And the carrots are, we can help with business development. We need 244,000 more units in the next 20 years across the counties. That's a big number.
Yeah.
But we can do this.
Kira, I want to make sure that I bring you in here, because this whole concept of regulation, it's always been a struggle to balance. I've definitely seen it with the city. Where should that investment go? Do we need the tiny houses? Do we need the city-sanctioned tent cities, affordable housing, the apartment units there, safe parking lots for RVs? What sort of regulatory frameworks are you thinking about when you talk about trying to tackle this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hear emphasized across the table is that we need an array of options, and it's really important that we're not just focusing in on one solution or one part of the solution, to exactly Sally's comment about the buckshots. We must not oversimplify this crisis, and concurrently need to address preventing homelessness whenever possible, addressing people's immediate needs tonight, and ensuring we have the housing available to create pathways out of homelessness quickly, and then the supports to keep people in housing. But those things do have to be concurrent.
Thank you. And Gordon, I wanted to make sure I touched on this. One of the most challenging statistics about homelessness is how people of color are impacted here. African Americans make up 6% of our general population, but they represent 29% of our homeless population. Numbers are even worse for American Indians. What do those numbers say to you in terms of homelessness as a social justice issue and how we should respond to it?
It is clearly evident that it is a social justice issue, and it has been. It's just now becoming more commonly known. So it is a challenge that we as a society need to embrace and recognize that our systems are designed to harm and disproportionately exacerbate challenges based upon race and ethnicity and gender. And so until we begin to actually recognize this is baked into our systems, we're going to have a hard time solving it. And I work with other people across the state, and this is happening not just in King or Pierce or some, it's happening across the state. So when you go to the rural areas of our state, you're going to find disproportionality in terms of the Latino community, the Native American community, and low-income whites.
Yeah.
And so We just need to take the time to recognize that it's not that we're bad people. We have systems that were designed to empower some folks and disempower others, and it shows up.
They've been in place for
hundreds of years.
Yeah, centuries.
Very true.
Yeah.
I need to start wrapping up the show, and thank you for doing all the work that we've done here over the past few minutes here, but I wanted to talk about those larger solutions in the future, because I think the tenor of the conversation around homelessness, just in the people that I talk to, has really changed over the past couple years. We have a lot of compassionate people who live in this area, but this problem has grown so quickly, it's become frustrating for a lot of people, including the people at this table. I'm trying to figure out what is it going to take with this regional approach to help convince people this time we're going to make some progress. Can I start with you, please, Gordon?
I think understanding that, the first step to solving the problem is recognizing you have a problem. So we do have the problem. I want people to understand it's not just those that are visibly homeless in the streets or in tents. There are a lot more people who I'm saying are just a few days away from being evicted. They're sleeping on their neighbor or their friend's couch. Yeah. This is happening throughout our community. Think of them as our neighbors, and what would you do locally to support a neighbor in need? And whether that's a human service provider, a government, or a small, medium-sized business, there's an opportunity to act. Yeah. And let's just do it now.
Here are your thoughts here as we wrestle with the homelessness crisis. How do we replace frustration with some hope going forward?
I think we need to be transparent and honest about the overall need, and we've heard more and more of that, of stating the problem is much larger than the resources that we have to solve for it right now, and allowing that conversation to continue is not getting us anywhere. So we need to be very clear and transparent, and then work together to make sure that we're addressing those gaps.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Marilyn.
I would say, both as the CEO of the Chamber and a former government official, we need to very much work on prevention, as Gordon pointed out, keep people from coming into the system. But I would also say, too, that there are probably what I call the visible homeless and the invisible homeless. Yeah. And when people express discontent and concern, it typically is with the visible homeless. And so what are we doing realistically about trying to treat that as a public health crisis and to get people off the street, to get them things like clean water, showers, and just to stabilize them. Yeah. And then think about the longer term solution, which is going to be hard because permanent supportive housing is hard to site, and this population is very, very expensive to serve.
It can
well
be.
Done.
Sally,
well
help us wrap up the show, please.
Well, I think that we can do some things right away, which include opening up more 24/7 shelters, and I want to give great kudos to Dow Constantine for opening up the West Wing of the
county jail. Yeah.
I mean, who would think that that would be available government space? But if we can use spaces like that to be able to offer people places to get them off the street and be able to say, we want you off the street, and we want, from a public health standpoint, for you to be healthier, and we are making those investments. But a tiny home, and boy, have I been criticized for wanting to support more places for tiny homes. It is better than living underneath the bridge in a cardboard box.
Amen.
And getting people into healthy, warm spaces, and then allow that pipeline to develop and encourage that pipeline to develop with the state, with our federal dollars, with the city. And frankly, I do believe that we're going to have to cough up $200 million more annually to do this. But for very low-income people, government responsibility, it's going to have to be on our shoulders for the very development reasons that you're talking about. Developers want to focus on middle income and higher income, and I understand that.
Okay, all right, a lot still ahead with this. Thank you for this great discussion, and we will be right back.
It has to be a combination of the short-term immediate emergency fixes and the long-term fixes.
Drug use is the problem.
If you really wanted to be out of the cold, you find some work.
Oh, I feel like if we start treating like people, not a problem, that would probably solve a couple issues at least.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter and give us your feedback. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. Do you have confidence in an expanded regional approach to solving the homeless crisis? Yes, no, or are you undecided? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and send us your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next time, state lawmakers are returning to Olympia in January. What are their top priorities in the new session? Our 2019 legislative preview next time on City Inside Out. I hope you join us.